Hey, everybody. Good evening to you. It is Wednesday, the 16th of April, 2025. Whoa, what a day. What a day. I can't say I'm surprised, a little shocked, but I told some colleagues this morning, I said, wouldn't it be crazy if prosecution finishes today? Then Lori says she doesn't have a case. And then tomorrow they pick the jury instructions. And then Monday we have closing arguments and then a verdict. And look what happened. I have no control over the court system here. I'm just saying that that was my prediction this morning. And I have witnesses who will testify that that is what I said. And that's what happened. We are kind of done with testimony and witnesses, with a caveat that I'll talk about in a minute. We have a lot to talk about. Today was a big day of trial. We can now see why they held Detective Nathan Duncan for the end. Fortunately, he was feeling better, or at least kind of like this, he said. And the judge said, if you're going to throw up, please don't do it in my direction. But he was able to stay on the stand all day, the only witnesses. He was cross-examined by Lori Vallow Daybell and answered the questions. And that's kind of what we're going to talk about tonight. Not kind of, that is what we're going to talk about. Lori rests, steamy texts. Remember those steamy texts? I believe Trina K called them promiscuous texts. The last witness and more. Here's what we've got on the slate tonight. By the way, tell us where you're watching from, because we collect all that information and it blows me away. There was a woman who came today who had never heard of this case a month ago. Never. She told a friend, she lives here in Arizona, she said, I want to go to a murder trial before I die. Her friend said, have you heard of Lori Vallow? She said, no. She goes, have I got a story for you? So she's been watching Courtroom Insider. She's been reading all the stuff on East Idaho News. She came to court today, and what a day to come. And I forget your name, ma'am. It was great meeting you and your friends. There were people from Utah today. There were people from Seattle. A blind woman came yesterday from Seattle who said she was a victim of crime when she was young because of her disability, and she has always felt a connection to victims, and she felt a connection to JJ. And she flew in yesterday, came to court. I got to chat with her, and I've met so many wonderful people. So that being said, today was a good day to come to court. Here's what we're going to talk about tonight. Prosecution rests with their last witnesses. They kind of fooled us. They had 21 people on their list. They only called 19. I don't know if that's fooling us. That's them, I guess, being over-prepared just in case. Lori Vallow Daybell rests, ? Detective Nathan Duncan is on the stand. Text, emails, photos, and zombies. The Z word comes out. What is next? Remembering Charles and your questions answered. That's what we're going to do tonight. So let's get straight to, I'm going to kind of do this in reverse order. Normally at Courtroom Insider, we start from first thing in the morning and kind of work through the day. Going to flip it to kind of lead with the lead, which is the fact that the prosecution rested. It was Detective Duncan's, you want to end with your really strong witness, and Detective Duncan testimony. He had a lot of stuff in there, and it would make total sense to end on him. But they kept referring to Detective Moffat. We didn't hear much about Hunsaker. I talked about him last night. He was on the list of potential witnesses. They never called him, so I thought, well, maybe they bumped him off, but surely we will hear from Moffat. He was the case agent during the first part of the investigation. But then again, in reality, he handed it off to Duncan, who's been on it since like 2020 June. So, and did probably the majority of the work. So Moffat might not really have much more to add than Duncan couldn't add. So they took those two off the list. Detective Duncan finished his testimony, and here is how Trina K announced that they were resting.
Your Honor, at this time, the state has no further witnesses. The state will rest.
All right, the state has rested its case, which means the state's portion of the evidence is done. I'm going to excuse the jury for a few minutes before you go home for the evening. Let me just do a consultation with the parties about tomorrow's schedule, and I'll let you know what time to report back. It should just be a couple minutes. So please remember the admonition. We'll let you know what time to report back tomorrow.
Okay, so the jurors were dismissed, and then the judge looked at Lori Vallow Daybell with probably the biggest question she's been asked thus far in the trial. Here's what he said, and here's how she answered. Now, I do want to give a caveat. I took two sound bites, I butted them together. The first is she says something that has been prepared. She consulted with her attorneys, and then she says something that had been prepared for her. This is kind of a standard operating rule that you say, we don't believe the state has met their burden. We think that it should be dismissed. Do you remember that was what happened in her Idaho trial? This happens at most criminal trials. So it wasn't too surprising that she said this. What was surprising for some, for many, is that after the fact, when the judge said, do you plan to present witnesses or testimony, what she said. Here's how that played out. I removed a big gap of her consulting with her attorneys and chatting. I kind of cut that just for time's sake, but here's how that played out.
State's rested, so do you plan on presenting evidence?
Can I confer with my
Yeah, go
team
ahead.
for a minute? Your Honor, I'd like to address a Rule 20 motion first.
Go ahead.
Okay. The state has failed to show substantial evidence for count 1, conspiracy to commit first-degree premeditated murder. The state has provided no evidence that I agreed with another person that any one of us would engage in certain conduct that I intended to promote or assist in this premeditated murder. Crime premeditated murder requires the state to establish a person caused the death of another with premeditation. The lack of evidence to show any evidence of a conspiracy to commit murder. There was no plan to murder Charles. No evidence has showed that, in fact, evidence suggested self-defense on the part of Alex. So I would like to put that on the record.
All right. State want to put a response on the record?
Yes, Your Honor. Looking at the evidence in the light most favorable to the state, there's sufficient evidence based upon everything from the iCloud messages from between Alex, the defendant, and others leading up to July 11th of 2019, that Alex Cox was invited over by this defendant, knowing that they were going to be having an intervention and knowing when Charles would be there and bringing a handgun over with him. The timelines on July 11th of the killing of Charles Vallow and the fact that the number of shots and the physical evidence at the scene, the statements by the defendant to Detective N. Clan that she took Charles Vallow's phone and would not give it back to him, the motive for money, and especially the defendant's motive for having an affair with Chad Daybell, all of those looking at together in the light most favorable to the state, the defendant or the jury could find the defendant guilty of conspiracy to commit first-degree murder.
Last word. Do you want to add anything?
No, Your Honor.
All right. The standard is whether or not a reasonable juror whether or not there's substantial evidence for a reasonable juror to find the defendant guilty. The court does find that there is substantial evidence that a reasonable juror could find the defendant guilty. The court will further add that the jurors are the ones who judge the credibility of the witnesses, and it's ordered denying the Rule 20 motion. Are you going to present evidence tomorrow, either through witnesses or through your own testimony?
No, Your Honor, the defense will rest.
And that's what she said. The defense will rest. But the jury wasn't in the courtroom. So the jury, she needs to rest in front of the jury so they know. They don't know at this point. They weren't called back in. The judge said, are you going to testify on your behalf? And if you are, you still can on Monday, but I need to know ahead of time. If you're not, then we need to be prepared for closing arguments. The state said their closing argument will be about an hour. Lori said hers will be less than an hour. And tomorrow what will happen is at 10 o'clock, Lori will be brought over. She'll meet with her attorneys. They'll go through the jury questionnaire, which will be, not the questionnaire, the jury instructions that the jury will get. The prosecution will get to weigh in. The defense will get to weigh in. The judge make sure that the instructions are everything that they all want. Then at 10:45, the jury will all meet. The media will be allowed, and the jury will not be back until Monday. I believe. We were in kind of a rush there. Yeah, I don't think the jury is returning until Monday, and that's what's going to happen. My apologies. So they'll go over the jury instructions tomorrow. We will broadcast what we can. It shouldn't be a long hearing, maybe an hour. So you can watch it on East Idaho News. I don't know if they're going to read through the instructions for all of us or if they're just going to kind of chat, and that'll be that. Then we're dismissed till Monday. Monday, normal time, 10:30, the jury will arrive. The state will do their closing argument. Lori will give her closing argument. The jury will then get the case. And we'll see if we get a verdict, how long that verdict will take. I'm interested to know your thoughts. Do you think they'll deliberate for a while, or do you think it'll be a slam dunk for the state? It'll be interesting to see. All it takes is one juror to have some doubts. And that's all it takes. And they were told that Lori said, you cannot hold it against me if I do not testify or if I do not present any witnesses. And that's what they will be reminded of. Remember, closing arguments, that's not evidence. That is not evidence. They cannot consider that as evidence. So when they go back and they deliberate, they can't discuss, well, they can think about what was said in that, but they can't say that is solid evidence. So that is what happens. So why didn't Lori testify? That's the question many of you have sent me. And am I surprised? I don't think she had really much to gain by testifying. And that's probably what she realized in her mind. She did not testify in Idaho, and that was a decision made that morning in that moment. They took a recess. Everybody left the courtroom. It was her all alone with her attorneys. They talked about it. Defense attorney will often say, I will advise my client not to testify. Simply because the prosecution, it opens a whole door as to what the prosecution can ask. And I believe Trina K was ready for cross-examination with Lori Vallow Daybell. And I bet she was kind of looking forward to it. Weren't we all, in a way? Maybe it'll happen. I don't know. I don't think it will. But really, if you go back and look at the pattern of Lori in this trial, she did cross-examine most of the witnesses. But anything that was kind of damning, she stayed away from. Today, all these text messages that we'll talk about in a minute, she didn't even touch. And that's how it seemed to have been with every single witness. She asked questions about stuff that really, at the end of the day, you wonder, where's she going with this? Maybe trying to poke holes in the investigation. But again, if she sits down on that witness stand and she has her paralegal or her legal team read those questions and she answers them, then it gets kicked over to Trina K, and Trina K can ask all sorts of questions. And that is why I think Lori figured, I'm not going to take the stand. And we'll see if that changes in Brandon's case. She still plans, as of now, to have that trial. Maybe after, if she is found guilty here, and maybe after a guilty verdict comes back, she changes her mind. I don't foresee it, though. I see another trial happening. But maybe she'll then hand it off to her legal team to let them do it. That would be interesting too, to see 3 Lori Vallow Daybell trials with 3 different legal teams. And what will she do in the 3rd trial as far as witnesses? Because now she's got time. Now she's got time to subpoena the witnesses she wants for that trial. Now she's got time to work with witnesses, to gather evidence, whatever. We'll see if that happens. So those are kind of my thoughts, and I'm not really surprised. I told some other reporters, I think this morning or yesterday, when we were all like, do you think you're going to do it? I'm like, at the end of the day, I don't think she will. I don't think she will. But it would be great to have her really be questioned and have her under oath testify to things that she can't get out of or just talk about what she wants. All right, so with that, let's transition over into Nathan Duncan's testimony. He's been with the department for 25 years in the homicide robbery unit. He arrived at the scene on that day, July 11th. He saw Alex Cox in the distance on the curb. He did not see Lori at all. He said that they had to get a search warrant before they went in the house. How it works is the patrol officers go in the house. They do an initial search. They find the dead body. They keep the scene secure. Then they have to get a search warrant to really intensively search in the house. And that's when Detective Duncan showed up. He had to wait for that warrant. Once he got the warrant, he went inside. He said that there wasn't blood. There was a little blood on the faucet. There was blood pooled underneath Charles, but there wasn't blood around him. There was blood on his hand, likely from grabbing his heart. There was no blood on the bat. There was no damage to the mirrors in the house as far as showing any sort of scuffle or any sort of altercation or anything like that. And then as he got looking, he saw a bullet in the floor.
When you were cleaning up the blood, did you notice anything on the floor that stood out to you where he had been located?
Yes, I did.
What did you notice?
When cleaning up the blood, I immediately noticed a defect in the floor consistent with a bullet strike that would have been close to or right on this area where the exit wound would have been on Charles' left shoulder.
So you had seen the floor and been processing that room while Charles was laying there, correct?
Right.
And once his body was removed, there's a pool of blood underneath where he was.
Correct.
And in that area, I'm going to put up Exhibit 60, is where you then observed that bullet strike.
That is correct.
My clip stopped there. That's where he found the bullet in the ground. And then the bigger part of the investigation that Duncan took on himself was really going through the iClouds. Do you remember in Idaho, there were days, maybe you don't if you're new here, there were days and days, it seemed like days and days where they went through the iCloud. It was so much. Today we got like a Reader's Digest, tiny G-rated version. I know some of the ladies in the courtroom that had been in Idaho told me after, they're like, oh, such a disappointment. No mention of the storm. No mention of anything like that. But there was some stuff. He said when he was going and there was some new stuff too. When he was going through the iCloud, he found an email account that was created in April of 2019. And the name on the email account was Karen Walker. But the person whose phone, he got a warrant for it, and it came back that the person who had the phone, even though it was named Karen Walker, the phone number was tied to Lori Vallow. She wasn't Daybell at the time. And he was able to go through the emails and on the account and see that several emails had been sent from this account. At this time, Lori is living with Charles in Houston. Chad Daybell's living in Idaho. Both of their spouses are still alive. And here is just some of the emails that were found as he was doing the search warrant.
In Exhibit 225, are these messages in the Lori Forstyle iCloud account between Lori Vallow and her brother Alex Cox, where they're talking about Ned?
Yes, they are.
Was the first time that you found that reference to Ned from February 15th of 2019 from Alex Cox to Lori Vallow?
Yes, it is.
And is that where we see Alex saying that Ned was at the temple yesterday looking for you? He thinks you are staying with me.
Correct.
And so again, we see the source is the Lori Forstyle, correct?
Yes.
And we see this is Lori Vallow's iCloud account, correct? And that's the number that we have associated with her with T-Mobile?
Yes.
And then Alex Cox's Verizon record.
Correct.
During your investigation on February 15th of 2019, is this the time period where Lori Vallow had disappeared and was no longer in contact with Charles Vallow?
Yes.
Is this the time period where Charles had JJ by himself?
Yes.
And do we see then Lori Vallow saying, that's good that he is so off, I guess?
Yes.
The next time we see the reference to Ned is that in March 2nd of 2019, again from Alex Cox to Lori Vallow?
Yes.
And does he advise, Ned just came by and Tylee unleashed on him. He came to my house and he went to Summers first. He ran up in a rental car.
Correct.
So again, your understanding is from this investigation, from testimony at court, that Ned was Charles.
Yes.
Now, again, we talk about, there was a time period when Lori is, both we've heard in Hawaii and in Idaho, correct?
Correct?
Do we also see Alex trying to get Lori Vallow's new address?
Yes.
And she gives him a lollytimeforever@gmail.com, correct?
Correct?
So the email ruse was eventually caught on by Charles Vallow when he found it. We've heard other witnesses talk about that, and we've heard, have I not been centered the whole night and you all didn't say anything? Sorry about that. I've been off to the side. You always want to be centered. I'm just looking at my screen now. Charles found those emails and confronted Tammy and even Chad and Lori about them. We heard other witnesses testify about that. There were two iCloud accounts that Lori had, the Lolly Time and the Lori 4 Style. And the iCloud account backed up a lot of stuff. But some of the stuff it didn't. Some of the stuff it just showed that there were like text messages between Chad and Lori, but there weren't the actual contents of it. And it showed that there may have been calls, but there wasn't. One of the interesting things that they found in the iCloud account was a photo taken of Charles Vallow's phone on a counter showing Adam Cox's travel plans. Charles Vallow booked Alex Cox's travel, and he had it on his phone as like on the screen. It wasn't a screenshot. It was like on his screen. Sometime after he was shot, maybe when Lori was out driving around. No, Lori had his phone, not then. When she was sometime that day, that phone was placed on a counter or sometime, and a picture was taken of it. And that photo was found on Lori's iCloud. So she knew her brother's travel arrangements. There was also the text exchange, which Adam testified of earlier, the fact he was trying to reach Alex when he arrived into town, into Phoenix, and couldn't. Alex was not responding to him. And then there was texts between Lori and Alex. And this is where it really started to get interesting. We've heard some of these texts before about Ned, about the temple and whatnot. And here's just some back and forth, just a sample for those of you who haven't heard before, of texts that were found on the iCloud between Lori and Alex.
We see a message from Lori Vallow to Alex Cox. So the plot thickens, call me when you can.
Yes.
Now, at that point, when you looked at phone records, did you see any call between Lori Vallow and Alex Cox initially after this first text message?
Not after that first one, no.
So about 47 minutes later, on July 9th at 9:50 p.m., does Lori Vallow send her brother Alex Cox a message, getting sleepy, so I'm going to need you to stay close to me the next couple days. Mel too. She can't go to Utah. They are planking some kind of intervention, but want Mel out of the way, so I'm left alone. I need to come get the stuff at your house tomorrow and store it or secure it. Lots to do. Thank you for standing by me. It's all coming to a head this week. I will be like Nephi, I am told, and so will you. When you saw that message, did you ever check Alex Cox's cell phone records to determine whether or not there was a phone call after that?
I did.
Did you see that Alex Cox and Lori Vallow talked on July 9th at 21:56 hours? What time would that be?
9:56.
So 6 minutes after this, for 56 minutes?
Correct.
So 6 minutes after this text message, Lori and her brother have almost an hour-long conversation.
Yes.
Now, in this message, when you were going through these records, did you recognize or learn who Nephi was?
So in going through this particular message, I knew that Nephi was a figure in the Book of Mormon related to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but I didn't understand the significance. So I then did some research to find out who Nephi was.
You were present in court when Adam testified, correct?
Yes.
And did his testimony about Nephi being told by the Holy Spirit to kill Laban and that this was a justified killing match with what you had learned when you researched it?
Yes, it did.
So he talks about Nephi. Remember that because we'll talk about it in a minute because Lori brought it up again about Nephi in the Book of Mormon. Also on the iCloud was photos of the beneficiary form that Charles Vallow originally filled out, with Lori being the main recipient, the beneficiary. But then there's another photo of a computer screen that shows he had changed the beneficiary to Kay Woodcock. And Lori had mentioned to Chad, I might be able to get into his computer this weekend and see what happened. It looks like she did find his computer. She found the document that Charles emailed to the company to change it and took a photo of the screen and sent it to Chad. Yeah, she had that. There was also the messages that really started to get really romantic and promiscuous and sexy and steamy after Charles died. But Tammy was still alive. And Lori started to call him Bubby. And they found out that he was Bubby because they were able to see their interactions, but they also found a recording of Chad on there, and it matched the voice that Chad made to a funeral home. And they didn't play this in court.
We see a message.
But I think I want to play it now. Many of you have not heard this call. This was not evidence. I don't know why they didn't play it. Maybe they wanted to keep Chad at a minimum out of it because I guess it's him in the funeral home and you would have had to call the funeral home lady in as a witness, and Lori technically was not on the call. Maybe that was it. But they were able to identify Chad's voice with this call. Here's a listen. This phone call was made the day that Charles Vallow died.
Third ring answer.
Funeral home?
Hello, my name is Sarah. I'm assisting them with their calls. How can I help you today?
We just had a death in the family, and we really don't want anything but a cremation, and then to send the cremains to a family in Louisiana. Just a simple, nothing other than a cremation and sending him to his family for a service in Louisiana. So, is there any way to know a ballpark price on that?
Yes, and I'm sorry for your loss.
Thank you.
Okay, let me transfer you over to the director who can assist you with the pricing. What is your name, please?
It is Chad Daybell.
How do you spell the last name, please?
Dabal, Daybell.
How are you related to the person who passed?
I'm his nephew.
And then also, this is for the Valley of the Suns in Chandler, correct?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes, he lives there in Chandler. I live in Iowa, so I'm just trying to help out.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yes, what is your uncle's name for reference, please?
He is John Dayball.
And last name?
Well,
Yeah.
Dabal.
Okay.
The same. John.
Does he have a middle name?
Myron.
M-Y-R-O-N?
Yeah.
And Chad, what is your phone number in case we get disconnected?
Yeah. This number, 515, I don't actually know my own number. Let me look real quick.
Thank you.
Mhm. Five 402-0143.
Thank you. Is he at a nursing home, hospital, or residence?
He passed away in a hospital. I don't know the details. I'm just calling.
Yeah, it's just for to know, because sometimes it's different if it's a residential or hospital or a nursing home. Okay.
Thinking they're sending him to the medical examiner. I'm not sure. I should have had more information before I called. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
that's okay. All right. Cremation with shipping. To which city?
New Orleans. Again.
Okay, one moment, please, Chad. Stay on the line. Let me
Okay.
transfer you over to the director who can assist you with that.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, Chad.
Yeah.
Thank you for holding. I do have the director, Carissa, on the line to further assist you.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
So my name is Chris. I'm a funeral director with Solid System Mortuary Cemetery. I understand that your uncle passed away.
Yes. And I'm just starting the process for the family. He didn't have many relatives. I'm his nephew. I live in Iowa. But what
So
they
sorry to
want
hear
to
that.
do it's sad to see him go. Yeah, I think he's going to the medical examiner. I don't know all the details, but what the family basically wants is just to have him cremated there in Chandler and then have its remains shipped to New Orleans. And we'll
Okay.
deal with the service later. So just trying to get a ballpark price.
Okay. So for a cremation, we are able to do our cremation for $1,695. Now, what that's going to include is the transportation into our care, the transportation to and from our crematory, our basic professional fees, as well as our crematory fee. Now, there's going to be a couple other charges there for you.
Okay.
So we are going to have death certificates, which are $20 a piece, with a processing fee,
Okay.
$15 permit fee,
All right.
and then we're able to do that transfer through the mail for you, and that's $150 fee for you.
Okay. Like UPS or something, I guess.
Okay.
So close, about 2,000 probably, kind of a ballpark, yeah.
Close to, yeah.
Okay. Well, that helps me a lot. I'm going to call one or two others, but I'll get back to you if we come that direction. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. If you need anything else, give me a call.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So that's how they were able to authenticate that Chad was Bubby with that call. That call, again, the jurors have not heard and did not come into play during the trial. When we broke for lunch, when we came back from lunch, we saw more texts, and including stuff about the plot thickening. These texts were sent the night before Charles was shot between Lori, Alex, Melanie Pulowski, or at the time, Melanie Boudreau, her niece. And here is what was in those texts.
We see a message from Lori Vallow to Alex Cox. So the plot thickens, call me when you can.
Yes.
Now, at that point, when you looked at phone records, did you see any call between Lori Vallow and Alex Cox initially after this first text message?
Not after that first one, no.
So about 47 minutes later, on July 9th at 9:50 p.m., does Lori Vallow send her brother Alex Cox a message, getting sleepy, so I'm going to need you to stay close to me the next couple days. Mel too. She can't go to Utah. They are planking some kind of intervention, but want Mel out of the way, so I'm left alone. I need to come get the stuff at your house tomorrow and store it or secure it. Lots to do. Thank you for standing by me. It's all coming to a head this week. I will be like Nephi, I am told, and so will you. When you saw that message, did you ever check Alex Cox's cell phone records to determine whether or not there was a phone call after that?
I did.
Did you see that Alex Cox and Lori Vallow talked on July 9th at 21:56 hours? What time would that be?
9:56.
So 6 minutes after this, for 56 minutes?
Correct.
So 6 minutes after this text message, Lori and her brother have almost an hour-long conversation.
Yes.
Now, in this message, when you were going through these records, did you recognize or learn who Nephi was?
So in going through this particular message, I knew that Nephi was a figure in the Book of Mormon related to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but I didn't understand the significance. So I then did some research to find out who Nephi was.
You were present in court when Adam testified, correct?
Yes.
And did his testimony about Nephi being told by the Holy Spirit to kill Laban and that this was a justified killing match with what you had learned when you researched it?
Yes, it did.
So then there's more texts with Melanie and Alex talking about spiritual things and the walls, not the walls are, those are my words, the walls are closing in, but really that something's happening. Melanie apparently was going to go to Utah to a wedding, and Lori said, you can't, I need you close. And she had to come up with a story, a lie, to tell her husband, Brandon, according to the text messages, I'll be sick, I'll tell him I'm sick. And you can tell Melanie really wanted to go to the wedding based on the text messages, but Lori's like, no, you need to stay, even to the point she's like, I can get a late flight. So there's a lot of back and forth. And then there's some texts about bad news for brother. There's only one brother that Lori sends to Alex. There's only one other brother, and that's Adam. And Adam suddenly is a Z, is a zombie. Doesn't it make you wonder what would have happened had this chain of events continued to keep happening? Like, where would it have ended? Would there have been other victims? Would Lori have gotten tired of Chad and moved on? I mean, there's so many what ifs in your mind that you can play out. But here is just some of those text messages that were played about the bad news for the brother.
And it says, need you, Adam is freaking out. Based upon your understanding of the case and the testimony of Adam Cox, is that when he found out Charles Vallow was dead?
That is correct.
So this one is from Lori Vallow to Alex saying, need you, Adam is freaking out.
Yes.
Again, as we kind of go through what was relevant, and we're not saying these are all of the text messages, on August 12th, do we see a text message from Lori Vallow to Alex Cox saying at Social Security?
Yes, you do.
Based upon your information and review of the case, were you familiar with August 12th being the date that Lori Vallow went to Social Security to apply for survivor benefits?
Yes.
Told us that when you were looking through these messages, we had originally looked at some of the messages from the Lori for Style account, and you had looked for messages involving Ned, correct? When we heard testimony from Serena Sharp, do you recall her using the word zombie?
I do.
And that she indicated that that was a term that Lori used.
Correct.
And it referred to something to do with the possession.
Yes.
As you were looking through these messages, did you ever see Lori referring to people as Z's
I
or
did.
Z?
Just the single letter Z.
Single letter Z. And so when we look at these messages, Exhibit 227, do we see starting on September 3rd, a message from Lori Vallow to her brother Alex Cox saying bad news on our brother?
Yes.
And Alex responds, what's that?
Correct.
And she says Z.
Yes.
And does Alex then say, really, when was that?
Yes.
As that conversation continued on that September 3rd, does Lori tell Alex as of early January?
Yes.
Now, is it your understanding, based upon both testimony from people like Kay Woodcock as well as your own investigation and testimony from Christina Atwood, that sort of in February and March is when Lori Vallow disappeared?
Yes.
So she's now saying her brother has been a Z as early as January. Does then Alex Cox respond back to her? That explains his interest in Charles.
You say her brother, I think, as far as Z or Zach? Zach is
Her
Z.
brother
Yes.
first.
Yeah.
So initially, she's talking about her brother, right?
Correct, yes.
And so in this conversation, as we start through, Lori is telling Alex that their brother is a Z, correct?
Correct.
As early as January, and it's tied to Charles, right?
Correct.
And in fact, the next text from Lori Vallow to Adam says, Ned recruited him shortly after. This is why, right?
Yes.
She then goes on to say he's part of the 24, correct?
Yes.
And Alex says, that makes sense. Wow.
Correct.
Does Lori then go on to speak of more Z's?
She does.
Does she in fact say, again, still on this September 3rd conversation, more sad news, guess who is the final Z of the 24?
Yes.
And Alex questions if it's Pops or Brandon.
Correct.
And then Alex also says, Zach. Oops, may not be showing yet, sorry. So Lori tells, guess who the final Z of the 24 is, right?
Correct.
And we see from Alex, he guesses Pops or Brandon with a question mark.
Yes.
And then Alex also responds, Zach.
Correct.
And sort of the times here are close in time.
Correct.
We have 10:20:29 and 10:20:43. Lori responds, nope, think of Judas, who loved me completely, then turned against me.
Yes.
And then we see Alex saying, tell me.
Correct.
And Lori Vallow says to Alex, yes, our sweet Zach, he is in paradise, the real Zach. It makes final sense.
Can you push that up a little further just to verify? That is correct.
And does Alex then ask Lori, his sister, when this happened?
Yes.
So we're still on this same date. And does Lori then tell Alex about the time he turned, makes sense, he being dedicated to Brandon and Ned?
Yes.
So again, we're still seeing this reference of Ned being Charles.
Correct.
And so now they're tying Adam, Zach, and Brandon with Charles.
Correct.
And so do we see again, so from Alex to Lori, so February.
Yes.
And again, is this around that time period where Lori Vallow disappeared,
Correct.
left JJ with Charles,
Yes.
and we had heard in the interview that the defendant gave with Detective Ann Clan that she told her about her just leaving and disappearing.
Yes.
As that conversation goes on, does Alex then say, how did Zach die, or was he forced out?
He does.
Previously in the Lori for Style, had we seen again a reference of Charles' body being alive, but Ned being gone?
Yeah.
And again, we've heard people testify as to Charles being possessed by that evil spirit
Yes.
and the unknown of if that spirit went away, what that would mean for Charles.
Correct.
There's a lot there. One that I don't think I've heard before is this talk of 24. They're all part of the 24. Maybe on the list, there's a list of 24 people on the dark list, or maybe this is the 24 that are zombies that they need to get rid of off the earth. I don't know what they're all part of the 24 is. And it's interesting that Adam or Alex is sitting there guessing, is it Adam? Is it Pops? Turns out it's Zach, Adam's son. There's a lot of texts, as we know. So much. And the way that Detective Duncan described it is he'd have to go through one iCloud. He couldn't like have them both up. So if he found something interesting here, he'd have to pull it out, close it, and then go to the other iCloud and see if something matched up. It was tedious. And we just saw a sliver. I believe Trina Kay said a grain of the data that they pulled. And they pulled the most significant stuff to show the jurors. There was messages that were, they could tell had been sent and received, but they don't know what they actually said, just that somehow it wasn't stored correctly, but they know that there was stuff there. And then we learned that Lori had a separate thing in her phone for Melanie 2, who was really Chad. So she had Bubby and she had Melanie 2 for Chad. And there was messages between her and Chad in that Melanie 2 folder chain area of her phone. We saw the marriage certificate that Chad Daybell filled out for Hawaii, and that was stored on the iCloud. Then we heard about the James and Elena story. And I know we've talked about that the past 2 years, and I know you all love it. It's just the most romantic thing you've ever read in your life. We have the whole thing on eastidahonews.com. You can go read it. I remember, isn't it weird what we remember? I remember the morning I heard about this James and Elena story, this was early 2020. So I don't even know if I just gotten back from Hawaii, I think. And I'm in Sam's Club. I'm in Sam's Club a lot, I'm sure you could tell. And my colleague Nate called and he's like, dude, you are not going to believe this. I'm like, what? He's like, these text messages, this love story, it's porn, it's cheesy porn. I'm like, what? What are you talking about? And he sends it, and I'm in Sam's Club reading it like, oh my goodness. We're not going to spend a lot of time on it tonight. You can go read it if you get a thrill out of that, but simply because we've talked about it before and there's a lot more stuff to talk about. But there were a lot of romantic texts back and forth. Here is just a sliver, again, a grain of some of it.
In these text messages, did Chad write I'll call it, romantic story about Lori and himself that he texted and emailed to her?
He did.
Did he have other names for them?
I believe the names were James and Elena.
Did that story seem to sort of at least match the timing of when they met?
It did.
Were some of them more promiscuous?
Yes.
Did they also include conversations, though, about people like Adam and Brandon
They did.
and about Ned?
Yes.
Do we then see a switch over from talking about Lori's family to now Chad talking to Lori about being deeply, crazily, madly in love with Lily?
Yes.
And do we see, again, messages to and from Lori and Chad talking about sort of their love for each other?
Correct.
So prior to this, you really had not seen this open, obvious discussions about their relationship.
I had not.
As the time continued, did you continue to see, again, messages of love, as well as a lot of calls?
I did.
although we won't read through everything here, is this sort of part of that story you're talking about of James and Elena starting in November?
Correct.
And is November when the Preparing the People conference was here in Arizona of 2018?
Correct.
And we've heard testimony from witnesses that Chad Daybell was there.
Yes.
And you found actually a recording on the Lori for Style of Chad Daybell at the Preparing the People conference in November of 2018.
I did.
Okay, so you've got that. Again, Trina did not go into these texts anywhere near what they did in Idaho. I tell you, she scratched the surface, but I think they got the idea across that yes, Chad and Lori were having the affair. Then we got to see a photo of Chad with Alan Osmond from the Osmond family. He took a picture that was on the iCloud and sent it to Lori and said that he took it for his son. And we also heard about the life insurance. I know we talked about that a minute ago. Maybe I might forego this clip. Let me see how long it is.
So I talked to
I'll
the
play it real
insurance
quick.
company. He changed it in March. So it was probably Ned before we got rid of him. They can't tell me to whom, of course, but it's done. I'll still get the $4,000 a month from Social Security.
Yes.
So on July 18th, after she talks with Banner Life Insurance, Lori tells Chad she's not getting the life insurance.
Correct.
But she tells him she's getting $4,000 a month from Social Security.
Correct.
Now, we know from Lori Vallow's text to Alex that she went to Social Security on August 12th, correct?
Yes.
And we also had testimony from Social Security about that.
Correct.
But here it is on July 18th of 2018, and she already knows she's going to get money from Social Security.
Correct.
Lori received a email indicating she was not the beneficiary, and later she had a phone conversation.
Correct.
Does this one appear to be sort of the earlier one because it references, I just got the letter from the insurance company saying that I'm not the beneficiary. It's a spear through my heart. Who do you think he changed it to? Brandon or probably Kay? He left nothing for JJ.
Correct.
Did that conversation go on? Wow, that's terrible. There's no way to find out.
It did.
And did Lori then tell Chad, I might be able to see when I get his computer on Sunday, I could check the email sent to the insurance company. It will show change of beneficiary. He must have done it recently.
Correct.
So we had seen, in fact, photos what appeared to be from a computer that were sent to Chad Daybell, correct?
Correct.
Showing that beneficiary change.
Yes.
So does that seem to match with, again, what Lori's telling Chad here about finding out who got that money?
It does.
Does Chad then say, it seems you would have to agree to change, maybe the name was forged, you should have a good paper trail to prove it, right?
Correct.
So he's trying to help her figure out how to get that money. So you then go on to say, I love you, this is terrible. It's probably another step in bringing down, what is this?
Gaddy Anton.
Did you ever learn what that was?
I'm sure I researched it, but off the top of my head, I don't know what it is.
Okay. Did Lori then tell him, nope, he can change it anytime he wants. He's the agent and anyone can change the beneficiary anytime with their own signature. I'm thinking it must be Kay.
Correct.
So she understood, at least to Chad, that Charles had that right.
Yes.
Does Chad then say, it will be interesting if he if it got changed after he had 2 bullets in his chest.
Correct.
That is so memorable, that line. It will be interesting if it got changed after he had 2 bullets in his chest. As a juror who's never heard any of this, I think that's a key point that, whoa, that's quite a statement to say. Granted, it didn't come out of Lori's mouth, but it came out of Chad, who was dating Lori or having an affair with Lori, who then quickly married Lori. Well, now it was time for Lori to cross-examine the final witness in her trial, at least this trial. She did not ask one question about the texts, not one. She asked about the procedure of when the detective arrived at the scene, about the custody of the phone, kind of the blood. She really wanted to stress the blood. Why wasn't it tested for DNA? Here's just a snippet of her cross-examination of the detective.
You didn't go to the Chandler Police Department?
No.
So you weren't there during our interviews?
No.
Okay. So, and you had mentioned something about you couldn't go in. I was confused. You couldn't go in until after the search warrant, but you were in before that, right?
No. So obviously your first responders, your police officers, the firefighters, they're going in to preserve life and treat the victim in this case. Then they back out. At that point, we will not let anybody in, given the circumstances of this case, until the search warrant is actually signed and executed. So we will wait outside the threshold of the house until that search warrant is signed, and then we will begin our investigation.
So I'm still confused. So you didn't go into the house until after the search warrant, or you did get to go in beforehand?
No, I didn't go in before. I waited until after the search warrant.
Okay. So you had testified. I'm still confused, sorry.
And I'm going to object again to the defendant testifying.
Just ask the question.
You had also indicated that you had gone in and that Charles was on the floor. Is that correct?
I think the question was asked of me is, what did I see when I went in? And so that, and I would say after the search warrant we went in, that's what I saw.
But he was already gone in the ambulance at that point?
He never went in an ambulance.
Charles didn't go in the ambulance?
No, he went with the medical examiner's office.
So what time did he leave?
I can't give you a specific time on that. I have to look at the medical examiner's office information for that.
But if you became the case agent, you were...
I want to pause right there. Lori did not know her husband went to the hospital. She thought he went in an ambulance. Ambulances generally do not carry dead bodies. Unless, especially a person who's been lying on the floor, who's been shot by a gun twice in a house. The medical examiner carries the body. Lori didn't know that. Lori did not know how her husband went to the hospital after he was shot. That, to me, was quite telling. That she learned it with the jury, with everybody in there. Again, that's another piece of interesting stuff that comes in. Here, we'll continue with her examination.
kind of aware, so you knew what had been done in the investigation, is that correct?
Yes.
And so you knew who had been interviewed, is that correct?
Yes.
And you knew what had been tested or not tested at that point?
Correct.
So the bat was tested for fingerprints. We learned that in the testimony, is that correct?
Correct.
And the results were inconclusive.
Correct.
And so there were no latent prints were identified. That's correct.
Correct.
And there were prints, but we just don't know whose they were. Is that accurate?
Sounds about right, yes.
Now, we learned that the bat was swabbed for DNA and sent to the lab. Is that correct?
Yes.
And was that ever tested?
No, it was not.
And why not?
When making this decision, you have to look at the probative value of that and what that would show or what a test would prove. DNA and fingerprints are not time specific. That bat was owned by Tylee, to our knowledge. It was in a household where you lived. It was in a household where Alex was. And at one point, based on the fact of when we understood the bat to have been purchased, Charles was living in the house as well. So that bat was accessible to all those people. So if at one point during that time that person touched that bat, All that I would be saying is that somebody touched that bat at some point, not during this incident.
Right. But there was no blood found on the bat, is that correct?
Correct.
But would that be able to be told from DNA?
There was nothing that was visible that could see, like if blood dries or anything like that. There was nothing that would indicate that here's a spot we need to test for that particular, for blood.
Right, but would DNA tell if there was blood? Could they find out if there was blood on the bat from the DNA test?
Once again, blood is, you would see if it dries and crusts, then you would see that particular blood. DNA comes in many forms. It can come in touch, it can come in sweat, blood, but you would think that blood would be visible at that point to be able to test. And we did not see anything like that.
Okay, so if there was none of Alex's DNA on the blood, wouldn't that tell us something? I mean, on the bat at all, then wouldn't that tell us something?
If there were none of Alex's, it would just mean that Alex never touched that bat at any time.
And wouldn't it tell us that Alex was never hit in the head with that bat?
Once again, it's not specific. I can't, if there was blood on the bat, then yes, we would test for that. But there's no visible blood on the bat.
I understand that, but when you're doing an investigation, are you not trying to figure out what happened?
Yes, and that's what we
Don't
did.
you want all the information to do that?
Yes.
And so whose responsibility would it be to request the DNA testing from the swab that was taken?
Once again, that would just show, it's not showing that it's blood. There's no blood on the bat. It was just showing that a DNA swab was taken of that particular area to be able to test later on. But there's no discoloration that would show any kind of blood.
And who in the Chandler Police Department would be requesting that DNA to be tested? Who would have to do that?
That'd
is
be
the
me.
question. It would be you.
As the new case agent, that would be me, or Detective Moffat at the beginning.
And so Detective Moffat never did that, is that correct?
Correct.
And you never did that, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. So if Charles' DNA was on the bat, then wouldn't that tell us something also?
Did he touch the bat at some point?
Yeah, that he took it from Tylee, like she said in her interview.
And I'm going to object and move to
Sustained.
strike that.
The jury should disregard that last question. That information is not in evidence.
Okay, there's a lot in that clip. I want to address the easiest thing first. Some of you were so concerned that there was a scream about 2 or 3 minutes into that clip. I had not even heard this, and I was in the courtroom all day today, and many of you messaged there was a scream. I think what happened is somebody sneezed, but it picked up on a mic really loud, and I hadn't heard it until just now. So nobody screamed in court. There have been other weird sounds. For instance, yesterday, and she knows I'm going to call her out, somebody suddenly from her phone, I start to hear my voice across the courtroom. A video that I had posted came on her phone, and she scrambled to turn it off. So it was a little awkward to hear me. And then the cough that you all hear on the mics, especially last week, we don't hear that in the courtroom. So sometimes you actually hear much better at home with the mics, because sometimes, we're straining. Okay, a couple things in that clip that I just played. Did you understand the point he was making about the DNA? It'd be like if you came over to my house and looked at my refrigerator and said, there's no blood on there. It looks clean. We're going to test it for DNA. You would find my DNA, my wife's, and my 3 kids. That's a given. You might find a neighbor kid who would open the fridge. You might find someone who stopped by to visit. I mean, what the detective is saying is testing that bat for DNA really would not have given us anything more, because we assume that you were in the house, Alex was in the house, Tylee was in the house, Charles was in the house, and JJ was in the house. And maybe there would have been 5 people's DNA on there. But what if there was only Tylee's? Okay, there was Tylee's DNA. What if there was only Charles's? Okay, that doesn't lead to anything. I think he was trying to make that point to Lori Vallow-Daybell, and she seemed to really be going down this DNA line of testifying. The judge tells, then she gets into the questioning with Detective Duncan. I'm going long tonight, guys. I'm sorry. I'm almost done to get your questions. There was just so much today. She starts to ask him what he read in other officers' reports and what he heard from other officers. And the judge had to tell her, you cannot do that. You cannot ask him what he heard or read other people say. Then she asked why her family members were not interviewed by him. And several of them, actually all of them maybe, did talk to the police. I'm not sure of the account of that. But here's a little bit of the back and forth on that, where Lori gets a little feisty.
You had testified earlier about the story of Nephi, is that correct?
Yes.
And you said that you researched it. Is
I
that
did.
correct? What research did you do?
Well, very basic research. I Googled who is Nephi. What does Nephi stand for? I've also, through this process over the last 4 or 5 years, have asked other members of the church just a simple question: tell me about Nephi. And every single person I talk to tells me that same story that was told by Adam.
So are you aware that there's 15 books in the Book of Mormon?
I am not.
Are you aware that 4 of those books are books of Nephi?
I am not.
That there's Nephi 1, 1st Nephi, 2nd Nephi, 3rd Nephi, 4th Nephi?
No, I'm not.
Okay. That there's many stories of Nephi. Is that correct? Or you don't know?
I don't know.
So the very first story is the story that,
I'm going to object to testifying.
It sounds like that's the way it was going, so please just ask questions.
so you did not read the Book of Mormon?
No.
You did not read 1st Nephi?
No.
You just asked people. That was your research?
I asked members of that particular church, and I also did an internet search, yes.
So you did an internet search, and it gave you all the stories of Nephi?
That's the story that came up.
So how long did you do that research for?
I couldn't tell you.
So in your research, did you discover that there's about 25 stories of Nephi in that Book of Mormon?
I didn't see that, no.
And that there's 4 different prophets that are called Nephi in the Book of Mormon?
I'm going to again object as to testifying, and the detective has already indicated, so asked and answered.
I'll overrule the objection. He can ask if he knows that or not.
What was the question, sorry?
I'm sorry, I can't remember. Can the court reporter tell
There's
us?
4 different people referred to as Nephi.
Yeah, 4 different prophets in the Book of Mormon that are Nephi. Are you aware of that?
No.
Okay. So isn't it true that you really have no idea what I was referring to when I referenced Nephi in my text message?
I can only go off of what I see. I can't tell you what you're thinking or what you're trying to relay there. But based on my knowledge and based on talking to people about who is Nephi, that is a story that came up consistently.
You relayed to the jury that it was in order to kill. You relayed to the jury.
I said that the story was the same story and similar to Adam told.
Okay, and you said it earlier that that was in order to kill, that I referenced Nephi. I will be like Nephi and you will be like Nephi. To the jury here today.
Ask a question. That's a statement, not a question.
Do you have knowledge that my text message meant that at all?
No.
Oh my gosh, I was on mute. I apologize for that. All of that because of the Lori Vallow. That's how it ended. That's how it ended with Lori Vallow. She said to the detective, "You are the one charging me with this crime," and he said, "No, I'm not. The state of Arizona is charging you with a crime," and in so many words. And then it ended for the day. Lori sat down, and again tomorrow we'll be back in court for jury instructions, and then after instructions, a break for the weekend while Lori prepares her closing argument. She said it'll be about less than an hour. The state said to plan for about an hour for them, and we will see if we get a verdict. All for this guy, Charles Vallow. I love this picture with him and JJ and Tylee by the ocean somewhere, probably when they were living in Hawaii. And curious what, JJ was looking at. I've got little boys, so I'm sure that he was distracted by something there. And so tonight we remember Charles Vallow, we remember JJ and Tylee, and we're going to get to your questions. The hottest question I've had all day long. Why didn't they play the body camera video of Charles talking to the police, pleading for help? I asked Rachel Smith, the special prosecutor from the first case, who, by the way, will join me tomorrow. If you have questions for Rachel, send them in. She said, well, first of all, I asked why that Chad Daybell call wasn't played to the funeral home. She said the call was not played because it was hearsay. Unless Trina wants to say that Chad was a co-conspirator, then there may have been an exception. But they've kept most of the co-conspirator statements out. Keep Chad at a minimum. And I've noticed that through this trial. They've really kept Chad at a minimum. You haven't heard much mention of him. You start to bring in stuff with Chad, he could get charged. They already said years ago they're not charging him. So that's why they didn't play the call. The video with Charles is hearsay. Rachel says no exceptions apply. Charles is unavailable, and so it has to be kept out of court. The minimal Chad in the trial keeps it simple for the jury. One less person for Lori to blame. Arizona is keeping it simple. It is hearsay even if the person is dead. That's why we didn't see the Tylee interview at the police station. That's why we didn't see the Charles Vallow late night video. One exception is forfeiture by wrongdoing. If you can show the person is dead because of the actions of the accused, then some judges will let it in, but it's risky. Trina is trying a very conservative, safe case. Likely the judge wouldn't allow it in anyway. This case will be very clean on appeal. I've noticed that. It is very simple. There's not a lot of stuff in the weeds. There you could really sensationalize the case, or not sensationalize it, but blow it up. And Trina's keeping it very straight. So that's why the video was not played. I've got hundreds of emails, not that many, but a lot. What's the second trial we keep hearing about in Arizona? That has to do with Brandon Boudreaux. Brandon Boudreaux, her nephew who was shot at, he was on the dark list. He survived. He wasn't even hit, thank goodness. Lori's also charged with conspiracy to commit his murder. That one will happen at the end of May, and I'll be back here for that. Why is the death penalty not applicable in Lori's Arizona case? Because she's not charged with first-degree murder, and there's not aggravating factors. So the maximum sentence is 25 years to life, which is the same sentence she could get with first-degree murder, but that's why she's not getting death here. After Lori was transported from Hawaii, she was initially represented by a female. Yes, Edwina. Another male, and Mark Means. I never understood what transpired behind the scenes since the female lawyer strongly argued on behalf of Lori regarding bail. Lori did have her bail lowered. However, when nobody would secure Lori's bond, did the female attorney request Lori to provide JJ and Tylee's proof of life to aid in securing the bond and continuing her legal representation, or did Mark Means maneuver? I don't know any answers to that other than the fact that it probably was very expensive to have 3 private attorneys on your staff. And Lori was running out of money fast. And those guys are not going to defend her for free. And there probably was some drama behind the scene, which is how Mark Means ended up being the chief lawyer for about a year or two. Are you surprised none of the witnesses have slipped up when referencing Tammy, Tylee, and JJ? This is from Andrea. I thought by now with all the testimony there would have been something said about them in past tense so the jury could pick up on it. Well, there was one that Lori said that JJ had autism. I think that Trina worked with these witnesses to say only answer the question. There could have been a slip up, or there might be the temptation as a witness to say, well, yeah, I learned about it because I saw the kids were dead. Some sort of phrase like that you can't bring in because that could create all sorts of stuff. Lori today mentioned Tylee, and the judge said you can't bring that in. So it was, again, as Rachel Smith said earlier, playing it safe. If the kids had been mentioned, would there be a mistrial? I don't think about a mistrial. I guess it would depend on how huge the phrase was that was said about them. If a witness went off that the kids were butchered and buried in the yard and Tammy really went off, then perhaps, but I think the judge likely would have told the jurors, disregard what you just heard and, forget what you heard. The court reporter's fingers are typing a mile a minute. Would you ever consider interviewing her about her job? Luana asked. I asked the Idaho court reporter after Lori and Chad's trials, and she did not want to be in the spotlight. I asked for some others. I'll make the request here too. Many of you are asking if I'm going to interview the jurors. I hope so. They think they do things a little different in Arizona, where I've heard that at the end of the trial, if the jurors want to talk, they might hold like a news conference type thing where everybody does a one-on-one. But if you happen to know a juror and would be willing to pass along my information that I'd love to interview them after the trial, don't do it now. That would be great. That's how I landed one interview with Nick after the Chad Daybell trial in last year. So one of you, who I know that your dad, hooked me up with that interview. So thank you. Do we know if Charles ever found out who put the passcode on his life insurance policy? Rebecca asks. Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. I think we kind of assume that it's Lori, but we don't know. That was never brought in because I don't think they could ever officially prove it. But that would be good to know. Will you try to interview Trina Kay? I'd love to talk to Trina Kay. I'd love to talk to Nathan Duncan. I'd love to talk to the defense attorneys who are helping Lori. The invitation's open. I will, after we get a verdict next week, assuming we get a verdict, I'm going to stick around Arizona for a few days and try to get some interviews. So we'll probably do Courtroom Insider a few nights next week, just depending on what develops. If nobody will talk, they might not talk until after Brandon's trial. So it might kind of be a quiet week, but anyway, I'm going to be still here gathering news. I have a question. Why was Lori's sister Summer texting Lori on July 10th and telling her everything Adam was doing? I don't know. I want to ask Summer about that. I think that Lori had told her family that Charles was abusive and that she was in danger, and maybe got them to believe this stuff, including her mother Janice. And so I think that she was being fed. Lori was feeding them some not so truthful information, but I will try to find out and elaborate a bit more on that. Can Lori plead the fifth? I guess she could, but I don't think she's going to be pleading now because she's still could change her mind and take the stand, but I don't know. Do you think the jury's wondering where the kids are? I'm sure they have. I'm sure they have wondered. I'm sure they're going to be in for a shock when they show up on Monday and they're like, wait, what? We're done? We got to go deliberate? What about the defense? I know so many jurors in Lori's interview were really kind of disappointed and bummed, like, wait, what? We're not going to hear anything about the defense? What's that about? So they probably will have questions about that. I came to court is from Amy and noticing the jurors out front during the lunch hours. Is it their responsibility to leave the area if they hear something? Yeah, the judge told them if you hear something to leave, don't engage. I was on the phone with my wife today, walking out of the courthouse talking, and I saw one and I said, I'm going to be quiet for a minute, honey, and kept walking. So yeah, I've seen multiple jurors, multiple places during lunch and after court. It's quite different than Idaho. Do we know if Charles's life could have been saved had 911 been called sooner? I think they said that with that type of bullet wound in the heart, your chances that you can survive up to 3 minutes at most. So they would have had to be right there. And then I don't know if the damage to his body with 2 bullets could have been repaired. I don't think so, sadly. Can prisoners have life insurance? We talked about this a little this morning when I was live that I hadn't thought about, but one of you mentioned if your policies aren't paid, if your premiums aren't paid, they're not going to keep your policy. I don't know if Lori's life insurance policy is being paid, but I guess if it was, and then when you died, I would assume you'd get a payout. I don't know if, like, being a convicted murderer eliminates, there might be a clause in a contract. I'm not really sure on that. There's a lot of questions here. I think we will stop with that one. Let me do some shout outs really quick. Heather and Michael, it's your birthday. It's Heather and Michael O'Hara. It's her birthday on the 19th and their 27th anniversary on the 18th. What's today? 16th. Happy early birthday and happy anniversary. Glenn Jepson, always a faithful. Always a faithful. He watches every night, and I appreciate it, Glenn. Thank you. Vicky Road, Victoria Korchak. Today is Margarita's birthday. So many April birthdays. Love it. Met some people today at the courthouse who have birthdays. Vicky Davison, Rona McCaw, Sunny Hallfax, Julie Sanchez, Vicky Johnson, Magnolia Rose, Michael Robertson, Rosa Alderez, and then we have somebody watching from the Qatar, Middle East. Amazing. Dosh Sardi. We also have viewers in Providence, Rhode Island, Maine, Guatemala, New York, Vermont, Long Island, Guam, Hershey, PA. Bless you all for watching. Thank you. So tomorrow I will be in court. I'll do a live video if you want on the way to court. Here's where you can follow me and see those videos. Tomorrow likely won't be very eventful. I shouldn't say that because you never know what can happen, but they're going to go through the instructions. We'll be back here tomorrow night with Rachel Smith. She's going to take your questions. We're going to talk about what happens next, her view of how the prosecution went, why Lori Vallow may or may not testify. We'll also try to get a defense attorney. With that being said, I do want to acknowledge our sponsor, Alan Browning from Browning Law. We appreciate them sponsoring Courtroom Insider this go round during the trial. And we also want to thank you so much for watching. I went way long tonight. I thank you all so much. Before I go, some wonderful people from Utah brought me these freeze-dried candies. I've tried freeze-dried Skittles and marshmallows. This is a freeze-dried Tootsie Roll. I wanted to try it on camera for the first time. I love Tootsie Rolls. They put these in a freeze dryer and it's candy. Oh man. Oh my gosh, that's hard. That is not like a normal Tootsie Roll. Sorry for the crunch. That's a better sound than someone screaming in the courtroom, right? No one screamed. Oh, that's pretty good. Interesting. Okay. This is from Basically Done. Thank you to the very kind people that brought me this candy. That being said, I'm going to log off for tonight, guys. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. Courtroom Insider. Take care.